This is Ali making another quick video for the SIG WEB NJIT people, the front-end development people. I'm going to go over some of the things that we learned at the meeting today, some of the stuff talking about Angular directives. Um, some of the people, I guess, had to leave, so um, hopefully this video you can go over it and it will help you out. Catch up with some of the stuff that we talked about at the meeting because I want to keep on going, talk a little bit about the structure of the application, and then really start getting into the meat and bones of everything. So what I want to just quickly get started. So this is the services. This is where we left off in the GitHub. This I pulled this straight up from the GitHub in the front end web app modified section. So if you haven't, please git clone modify this modified branch into your depository, into your directory, sorry, in your computer. And yeah, I mean, if you have already, then do git pull, but you should have this running in your computer. Do grunt serve and then have the live reload run your web application on your computer and follow along with me. So if you have done that, you'll see something like this. Um, this is coming off from the last video that we did, that I did for the Angular services. We made a quick mailing list that pulled up the data from a JSON file, and then we created remove buttons that were able to remove each contact, and then at the bottom we were able to make a button that says add new person, where you can add somebody new and then click save. We haven't specified, like, we haven't made any rule that it can't be empty or anything, but and then you're able to add new people and stuff and then remove them. So if you haven't done this, you don't, I mean, if you haven't gone to the mailing list, there's a lot to learn over there, so definitely check my last video out. But if you haven't, that's okay. We're just gonna take this and do something with it. You're not gonna create something, a new mailing list or whatever. So it's okay. You don't need to know how we created this mailing list. You just need to know, uh, you just need to have it in your folders to work along with us. So I'll put this to the side. Okay. Here I'll do. I'll lower it in here so you can look at it. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is I want to show you. So in the home.html here, so in our home page, so our home page is rendered using the home.html page, right? The home.html. And in our home.html, we have the mailing lists HTML, the HTML related to the mailing list component or part of the whole home page. As a matter of fact, everything in this homepage besides this title, really, I mean, even the title itself, is related to the mailing list. But in our homepage down the line, if you have an application, you'll have different components. You'll have a mailing list, maybe you'll have a text box down somewhere here. Um, Maybe you'll have an events page where you show different events. Um, you'll have different components. Maybe you have the social networking buttons in the footer, or you have the header and whatever. You have different components, and you don't want to have all of the HTML inside the home.html. You want to have specific code that is related to your home page in your home.html. Excuse me. And you want to keep all of the different components in another part and then just link them up using home.html. So what we're going to do is simply create something called a directive, which is a way that we can break things down even further. So we can use things like different components that we create once, and then we can iterate that component throughout our home page, our about page, about our contact page. We don't have it, but we can create a mailing list. We can specify a mailing list component, and then we can use it in any page that we want. So to get started, I want to break this HTML code off. I want to have only things that are related to the home.html in here. So I'll take the script to okay, I'll even take the I'll even take the comment. Why not? Yeah. All right. We'll take everything, and you know what? We'll create a div here instead. Okay, and we'll just leave it there. And we'll in the templates create a new file called mailinglist.html. And we'll put the mailing list HTML in here instead. And then we can okay, so we have separated it in our home. So how do we get that mailing list.html on the home? We create a new HTML element. So if you do div, you can remember from the last things, you can do ng-app, you can do ng-repeat, you can do ng-model. These are all directives, right? Um, these are all HTML attributes that are not part of the base HTML. It's a whole new attribute that is not defined in the HTML code, but we create it and then we specify what it is. Well, what does this attribute do? Or what does this element do? So there's a div element, and somewhere in the back of the HTML code, somewhere where it renders the HTML and compiles it, it knows what div does, right? I mean, if we specify like Ali, it does HTML is not going to say give an error to this code. It's going to think that there is some element named Ali that is not defined, but we can define it and say, well, Ali does these things. Just like how UL makes an unordered list, or li makes a list element. We can use the same thing to create our own elements. So in here we can do mailing dash list and then close it. So we created a whole new element, something that is not familiar to HTML and it's does nothing to us until we start defining what it does, until we start specifying what its functions are. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so we can save this, and right now this won't do anything because we don't, I mean, we haven't really defined what mailing dash list is. We have to link it to this mailing list.html for everything to work, and that's where the directives come into play. So let's create, we have the controllers and we have the services folder. Let's create a new folder called directives. And in our new directives folder, we'll create mailing. We'll do, did we do, what was our, no, escape out of it. What was our, well, that was our naming convention for controllers, directives. Okay, then we'll do camel case for directives. So you want to have a same naming convention for everything, you know. We'll do camel case mailing list.js. Okay, so for our directive, so we can start typing Angular dot, but since we have specified our module, we don't need to do Angular dot module anymore, because in our JavaScript here, we have specified a variable named app. So all we have to do is just do app dot directive, and our first thing that we pass into this directive function is our name. So the name is important here. We do a camel case mailing list because what Angular does is it takes this code, gets rid of the dash, and then turns this into a camel case code. So it turns it into this. This here has to match up with this. But we don't have to specify mailing dash list here. We can just do a camel code name, and Angular will automatically turn this into this. So it will match it up. Trust me, it will. Angular is awesome in that way. And then we have and then we gotta obviously do a callback function. Okay, so just to make sure that it's working, let's just do an alert saying it's working. All right, and then we save it. Let's see if everything's done without errors. Okay, let's bring up our code. Obviously, the mailing list won't be there, but our alert is not there either. So let's do console.log .directive function. Let's do log instead. See if we can make it work. Not that one. Then we'll inspect console. Okay, it's not running anything right now, and not so sure why, but um, as we go along, I think it's definitely linked up. I mean, let's check it up. Hold on 1 second. Let's pause this. Okay, so mailing list. Oops, that's the services. In our home, we have mailing dash list, and then we close it, and then in our mailing list.js we have, oh, okay, we haven't it just clicked with me. Okay, we haven't put um the script into the index, so we have to, I'll just copy this. Oops, no, I don't want to get rid of it. And instead of controllers we do directives, and then camel case mailing list.js. Okay, go back to it. Log is not defined. Did I do log? Didn't I do console log? Oh wow, console.log. Well, the fact that its log is getting undefined. Can I read compile of undefined? Mailing list function. We have specified it in our code. Property of undefined. Not so sure. I mean, it should be working. Let's keep on writing the code, and I think it will definitely start working while we're doing that. Maybe we have to restrict it while I'll show you what that means. Maybe that's what we have to do for it to work. Oh, yes, okay, I keep forgetting that, jeez. So, app.directive returns something at the end. It returns an object. So we have to do a return, and then in here we have to return. Okay, now if we, hopefully if everything, aborted due to warnings. Number 3, console.log. Unexpected token. How is that unexpected? Console.log is... It's weird. Return. I mean, should we do alert? Maybe it doesn't do... It's weird. Okay, maybe we have to do some restrict, that's why. Um, that will be maybe the only way that it's going to work. It's not gonna, it doesn't even compile. Okay. Alright, so where's our code? Okay. So let's keep on writing it. I know we're running into some errors, but um, maybe you can't just do console.log straight into the return. You have to do it in the controller. And Yeah, I guess that's one way of looking at it. Okay. So, well, if we compile it without the console.log, it's going without errors. So that means it should be okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is do restrict, and I'm going to say E. So what restrict does is it's kind of like a check for yourself. You're saying that I want to restrict this directive's name where it links up to an element. So this is an element. But you can also specify some div here and then do mailing list as an attribute. You have an option to do mailing dash list here. So call mailing list as an attribute to the div element. You also have the option to call div class mailing dash list. And you can specify which one you want to restrict yourself into by calling either E, A, which is an attribute, and C for the class. Or you could just do AEC and this will say, well, I don't really have any restrictions that you can use in either an attribute, an element, or a class, doesn't matter. I'm going to keep it at at E, sorry. I like to use C sometimes because I can do some bootstrap code. Let's say like I want to make a table here and then like do table like let's say striped and then um, so then my directory mailing list and the bootstrap code is in just this one class. So I can keep things neat like that if I want to. But I'm just going to keep everything in the E as an element. So restrict E. That's all we have to do with restrict. And then we can specify now our template URL. And you know what template URL is from our route where we specified our route. We'll do home state as a template slash home. So you can do the same thing as in the directive. You can specify that template URL is mailing. Oops, it's just small, right? Mailing list.html. So you can save that. Hopefully done without errors. Oh, templates. Templates.mailing list.html. Okay, awesome. Now we got our mailing list back, right? So we're actually getting the functionality of everything too. So that's perfect. The reason that we're getting the functionality is we're still connected to the home controller here, and the functionality is still there, no problem. We're just linking the template URL now. So now we have divided our mailing list HTML from home. So now we can, copy this and then maybe use it in the about section. I don't know if like you could just copy it. Like I haven't really tried it like that, but um, maybe you can. Let's just do that and then is it compiled already? Okay. And if you go to about, oh, you got the list. But since the controller is in the home controller, you're not the controller's not picking up anything. Actually, we're gonna fix this so then you can use this. Actually, this is perfect. So now I'll get back to this once we finish the directive. But you see, like at least the template is showing up. But because the controller is in the home controller, it's not really using the mailing list service to pull up the data. But at least you can see that the table gets connected, so that's perfect. Awesome. So, awesome sauce. So, all right. So, we can just get rid of that, but we can get back to that later. Let's get rid of this. So, I hope you can start to see now that how we can compartmentalize things, how we can break things up into little codes compartments that we can reuse and reiterate, and everything has little compartments itself have their own controllers and services and whatnot. And we're going to go through them right now. So we have our template URL, and then we can specify our controller specific for the mailing list. So in our home controller, all of the controller specific, like all of the functions, the variables, this mailing list service, all of these things are related to the controller of mailing list HTML, right? But again, just like the HTML, we want to keep things that are related only to the home page itself in the home page's controller. We want to divide this thing up. So if we had a bunch of different compartments, we don't want to keep it all in one home controller. We want each thing to have its own controller itself, and then home controller be a way to link things up together. So the same way, we're going to take everything related to the mailing list itself. We're going to remove it and then put it in the mailing lists controller itself. So we're going to take that. Is that this one? Okay, that one. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Actually, I haven't done this in the meeting, but in here, actually, you can get rid of the mailing list service now, because you're not going to need that anymore. So you can save that. And this will break our code, hopefully. Yep, it's not even like nothing's getting picked up. Alright, not that one, this one. So now we can put that in the controller in here. Now controller in here, just like in the home controller, is dependency injected. So we can actually do annotation here also. So we'll do, why is it not doing it? Okay. Oops, not $, scope. And also we want to call our mailing list service here. And then we're going to obviously inject these into the right here. And then we have to close the, I think right here it goes, right? Yeah. Boom, boom, and then a comma over there. Okay, now our code is annotated and it's given me an error. Number 5. Scope, mailing list service. Scope, that function. Mailing list service. Finish our code and then we close it. Why can't, yeah, shouldn't we be closing it over there? No, there's no way. Okay, well, we'll worry about the annotation, dependency annotation part later on, but should be able to. Now this one just is the return one. So yeah, I mean the function could, okay. We're not having the, okay, awesome. Okay, we just forgot a comma here. I mean you should be able to do dependency annotation, especially if you're minifying your code. Okay. So we have injected, just like how we're injected here. We injected the scope dependency and then the mailing list service dependency. And let's see if that brings back our mailing list. Yes, it does. You see now it's not taking the home controller's controller, but it's actually using its own controller. The controllers things that are dependent on the, like, all the things that mailing list uses is it in it is its in its own directive. So everything is separated now. It's perfect. Like only things that are exclusive to the home page should be here and should be here, but it should take different compartments if you're using them in your page. So it's perfect. So let's keep on building on our directive. So we have our thing, and then I also want to bring in the jQuery function. Yeah. So we have our jQuery here, and the reason I haven't put the jQuery is because I just wanted to keep it easy. But now let's do it that way. So all your jQuery items related to the mailing list component itself should be in your controller. All your jQuery should be in your controller part, not in your HTML. This is bad code, but I just did it when I just to be quick before. So just go to our mailing list, and on the top we'll just put the function, And now it should be hidden just like it was before. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so this is awesome. So everything part of a mailing list is coming through this right now. And I hope now you can see how we break things up so they can compartmentalize, I guess, if that, that's the word to use it. Um, One last thing I want to do before I go, I want to talk a little bit about the link function. So, I told you that we're going to have, actually, let's check the about now. Let's check the about page. You see now the about page is actually getting the list also because we're not specifying the mailing list in our home controller. Since we did that, about controller, like about page didn't have anything because if you look at the main.js, about page takes its controller from about controller and it goes there and it doesn't see anything about the mailing list. But only things related to the about page itself should be here. So if you put it now in the about.html, you just all you have to do is put in the mailing list now is this. You just include the element in your page and boom, you got a mailing listing right here. Now you can put it in a certain div and have these things aligned really nice using Bootstrap, and your website will be like functioning and working perfectly and really fast too. Like you see how fast like everything gets removed and page changes are super fast. Awesome. So awesome sauce. So okay. So one thing though. So let's say that your about page, you want your about page to get its mailing list from another source. Let's say you have an API contacts. Maybe this is SIG web. Maybe we're making a website for all of these different SIGs, and each of them have their own email like list with each member's address, first name, last name, and stuff, right? What if they all have their each ones? Well, this will this where's the directive? This calls the get function here, calls the service, and then the service goes to API/contacts.json. So it's always when you call the service, it's always going to go to this contacts.json. Well, what if you want to specify what this is? So then you gotta call a link function. And how does it work? Okay. So we want to be able to access some of the stuff that we have in here. We want to access the element. And then we're going to also create an attribute to this element. Just like how you create a div and then create a class attribute. Right? You can call a class. We can actually call a class to this element. It's now just another HTML element, just like div or HTML or table or whatever. So we can call an attribute, but we can call it just again, we're going to specify a random attribute that we have. Let's call it resource. We can call it anything we want. And I want my home page's resource to be pulled up from API/contacts.json. All right. And then you know what? What we'll do is just to show you guys what we're talking about. Would I be able to duplicate this? Yes, I can. Nice. Contacts2.json. And then in our first email, what we'll do is blah blah at gmail.com. And our first name will be blah blah. And then last name blah. Okay. Okay, so let's say that we have a different. I just wanted to show you guys that we have some difference between the two JSON files. I might not keep this, but yeah, I just wanted to just to be able to show you guys. So we create in our home page, we specify that the resource should be pulled up from API/contacts.json, and then I'll just copy this. But in our about section, it should be coming from contacts2.json. So how do you hook things up like that? So how do you hook this up to get it pulled up from another? Because right now it's just getting API/contacts.json. Okay. So in our directive here, right before the controller, we can specify a new function called a link function. We can open it, and then let's not forget our comma again. So link function is not dependency injected. It takes only a certain set of arguments. It takes a scope, an element, an attribute, I'll call adders, all the attributes that are, and then it takes a controller. I'll call this a mailing list controller. All right, which is just a link to our controller. So what we want to do is in our service here, we want to, instead of calling this get function and then the get function is calling this, well, we don't want this. We want to specify here what it's going to be. Well, then we can pass an argument to the function. So let's, instead of doing API/contacts.json, let's pass some argument like res, and then we'll pass that into the get instead, and we'll specify what res is in our directive. This will definitely break our code. Yeah, okay. Because it doesn't know what res is at this point. Well, we know we have to pull it up from the attributes. So scope is this, is the same scope. This scope is this scope. The reason that this scope is not $sign is because to indicate that this is not dependency injected, that it's just there. The element is our mailing list element. We can mess around with the element if we have our mail directive is the element itself, but if we have a the directive itself is a attribute, we can mess around with the element that it's bound into, and stuff like that. And then the attributes is all of the attributes that are in here. We only have one named resource. So we can actually I can show you that how that works. If you console.log adders.resource, for example, you will see that when we inspect, we have a bad HTTP request because the HTTP request is saying, well, I don't really have anything. What are you talking about? I don't get it. So let's just keep it API/contacts.json for now. So API/contacts2.json is passed into the about page. You see it's in the about page. And then in the home page, API/contacts is passed. So every time we send the page, the directive gets called, you see? So every time we go to the about page, it gets called and then it logs in the, oops, the logs in the thing. Okay, perfect. Alright, so let's just go back to res because I won't need it anymore. Need to console log anything. So what we need to do is pass this attribute into our get function. So now in our get function, we can specify the res or resource. So we don't just call the get function, but we call it passing the resource that we are going to pull up from here. Pass it into the service, and then it gets used into the http.get. Perfect. So how do we call this? Because link is not dependency injected. You can't do mailing list service. It's not a dependency injected function. It only takes 4 arguments: scope, element, attributes, and the controller. Well, at first I thought, well, okay, then if it takes our controller, then we can probably write mailing list controller dot mailing list service. This doesn't work. The reason why is the mailing list controller right now is not necessarily linked to our controller in the directive. It's just an empty object. It doesn't know which controller to use. You didn't require any of the directives that I can link to. So what you need to do is, even though it sounds really funny, you have to require in the directive require itself. So you just do require here, you write require, and then you specify the directive that you want to require. Now this makes this is funny when you're requiring the same directive itself, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you're because this is also used to connect directives together. So if you want to connect multiple directives together, let's say the mailing list has a dependency, it depends on another directive, or you want it to connect with another directive, then you use require. Now if you want it to connect to itself, you still have to use require because the controller, mailing list controller, doesn't know. It only gets populated by what is required in your directive, in your code here. So now it's linked up. It's perfect. So what we need to do is, well, can we do this again? Now that when I wrote this, okay, so can we do now mailing list controller dot mailing list? And then when I and then like dot get, right? I mean, let's just see. I mean, it should be able to do something. And then it'll give an error. Res is not defined. Oh, okay. Well, let's define res adders dot resource. Okay. Okay, well maybe it's because now you don't need this. Okay, so it says cannot read property get of undefined. So even though you're calling mail list service, it doesn't understand, like, even though you have the controller, it gets linked to this controller, mailing list service doesn't understand what to do. You know what? Let's try this. Maybe it'll work. And then maybe it'll work. We'll do then functions. Then we'll do scope. No, it says res is not defined. No, cannot read property get. Okay, so it's not reading the property get because it's not really connected to the mailing list service. Because mailing list service is only dependency here. It's in the controller. You need to only use mailing list service in the controller. This is bad practice. I thought maybe this could work, but again, it's given an error. But it's okay. It shouldn't be called like this. You should only use scope element and then attributes. But if you want to do anything that is if you want to call a service, you shouldn't be calling it in the link function anyways. You should be calling in the controller. So let's go all the way back. Or we could just, yeah, I mean, everything's okay, right? Okay. So instead, what we're going to do is we want to call a function in the controller that's going to run this. So all we need to do is just create a function in the controller. So we do this dot, let's call a function like get list, and that equals to some function, and we can put our code inside of here. And then we can call this function and then pass it the attributes. So now we can do mailing list controller, and then we can call the get list function, and then we can pass it attributes.resource. And then we have to take it obviously, so we'll do res, and then we'll pass res into the get function. So if everything works, mailing list controller.getList gets called. It passed attributes.resource. This function runs, takes an argument res, puts it into the get function, goes to this thing, takes it and then puts it into the http.get request, and the mailing list shows up. Home page. Okay, awesome. So the http.get is working. Now, as you can see, the Tejas Kumar is here. Panchal, I'm probably pronouncing that horribly. Let's see if the resource in about is actually the blah blah thing. Perfect. Blah 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 at gmail.com. I don't even know if this like I wonder if I'm sure blah blah at gmail.com is taken, but I highly doubt that somebody ever created like this whole first name, last name, and email. But perfect. So it's pulling up from two different resources. So now you have not just a mailing list that is reusable in all of these different pages, but you can specify where you should get your code from, and so that you're not pulling up the same JSON. So now if you have different SIGs and then they have a different JSON file with all of their members' names, last names, and email, well then they can just do call in the SIGs dashboard. We just do resource, and then we can actually specify this too. Instead of doing this, we can specify like we can do an API, and then instead of contacts, we'll probably do like SIG web for SIG for our SIG, or we'll do like SIG AI for SIG AI's JSON file. Well, it will probably be a database, but yeah. So we can specify what resource, what PHP code, what JSON code that we should get everything from. So this is pretty much it. I hope you guys understand. There's some other stuff. If you guys want to learn, you guys can go on YouTube and watch Learn Code Academy's stuff. But I hope you guys understand how, like, now that things are compartmentalized, things are small down into little pieces, um, and Angular application that you're going to make is it's going to feel like you're making this big app that are made of these smaller compartments that all come together, work perfectly and beautifully, um, are tested well, and we haven't gotten into testing, but still they work and connect beautifully to create your huge Angular application. So if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate. I haven't seen any issues uh, related here. I haven't seen any new um, things. Oh, I want to say that I also posted some introduction here in my readme.html. So read that. It goes over some of the tools that we will be, we're using. People wanted to know like what each one is. So I wrote all this. So hopefully you guys read it through it. I'll really appreciate it. So if you have any questions, again, open up an issue, send me an email, just let me know. But I'll post this final code up again. So the modified will be modified, I guess, once again with the directives. And yeah, so have a nice day, guys.